So just after my MSc, I was interested to understand a very interesting phenomena, that is the individual variation in behavior. So one of the examiner who came to our college was a person who was working on the reproductive system of rats. So he told me that during his PhD years, he discovered that the Helen-Bruce effect. So let me add 2 lines about Helen-Bruce effect. So in this Bruce effect, after the mating, if you separate the females from the female rat from the male rat after the mating, and you introduce the urine of an unknown rat, spontaneously the embryo will be aborted. So I got impressed with this experiment he did, and during his PhD, he has discovered that if you keep the urine or the smell of that rat, the stud rat, the embryo will be protected. So which gave me a question, or which ignited me a question in my mind, how one individual is differently recorded or differently treated by the nervous system of this rat, and how it is getting executed as a physiological response. And I decided to join this person's laboratory for doing PhD. We started some works on the rats, but it didn't work out as we expected. So then what we did, that we slowly moved to another species, that is fishes, which was available at that time at the laboratory. And it can be considered as an accidental jump into a new area. But in fishes also, my PhD supervisor told me to study the ecological impact, but I was not much keen about studying the ecology, which was never my area of interest. I told him that I want to study the psychology of the fishes. So I'm talking about the situation in 2003. At that time, fish cognition was slowly emerging all over the world. And the first textbook in that line came out in 2004, which contains the details of one of the work which we did. So interestingly, what happened, that he was not happy to hear that I am going to try the psychology of fishes. So he told me that you have to work for 3 to 4 months and come up with a paper which is accepted by the people. Otherwise, you will have to move to some other subjects which he says, or leave the laboratory. I took that challenge and I started studying the perception in fishes. And I came up with one of the first paper in that line, that is, in them also certain stimuluses can initiate certain unexpected behavior like fear. For instance, we never expected that a shape of an eye or a black spot in a bright area can induce fear response in fishes. So as I said I was more interested in the social part, like individual variation in social response. I decided to understand how the acquired factors or the cognitive abilities, which is often attributed to higher mammals like human beings or primates, the familiarity, how the familiarity is going to influence the behavior of the fish. So even though when I said the familiarity, it was not an acceptable thing for my supervisor who was a biologist, because generally we consider fishes as automatons. And a factor like familiarity, which questions whether the familiarity can influence an instinct, such questions are very rarely being addressed in the laboratories at that time. So then what we tried to explore, that was my first paper, was we tried to explore how the instincts, because we know that the fishes, or we were believing that fishes or the other animals are automatons which are dependent upon instincts, could be changed by the experience. And we found that in this species, if you keep the individuals with other individuals, they develop familiarity, and the familiarity brings biases in their decision making. And we further found that when this familiarity, if you give the familiarity with an exotic species, which is an alien invasive species as far as Indian waters are considered, the familiarity, that is the experience, can even overcome the instinct that is joining the large group or the groups of its own species. So we found that the fish after getting familiarity, challenging the instinct, started joining the group of familiar individuals and bringing biases in their decision making, which actually was one of the major finding at that time, and we got a lot of attention, and which actually decided my fate as a researcher, and I am still continuing the learning ability, the cognitive capacities and decision making in various physics fields. My basic thinking is grounded on biological theories. So as far as biology is concerned, everything has an evolutionary history, including the consciousness. And as a biologist and as a researcher who studies a group of organisms where 32,000 species are available, I believe in a different kind of concept in consciousness, which you can call as niche consciousness. Because each ecological niche compels the organisms to come up with a set of conscious or the cognitive capacities which can establish into the consciousness or the awareness, which is, or even the meta-awareness, which is required to survive in that specific environment. So comparing the consciousness of human being, which is located in one position of the evolution of consciousness or cognition, and fishes, which is considered as the organism from which all the tetrapods has evolved, is not going to be a good idea at all. So they, as organisms living in a different world, might have evolved the capacity to have the cognitive abilities in a different way. And another interesting finding which recently came out was that fishes also can have the capacity for the awareness of self in quote unquote. Because the wrasses, the cleaner fish, a recent study has shown that they have passed the Gallup test, which is considered as a ground as a mark for the awareness of the self. And another interesting study shows that fishes has the capacity for transitive inference. So if the organism has a capacity or an agent has a capacity for transitive inference, it should have a concept of at least a proto-self, because without which you will not be able to locate your position in a series of the quality which is represented in a series of other organisms. For instance, one of the study has shown that when fishes are allowed to see the fights between different individuals, like if they have seen the fight between A and B, where B wins, and B and C, where C wins, if you keep A and C together, they will never go to challenge the C, because they get an idea that C is superior to A, and they are also able to put themselves also in that monotonous series. So the capacity for that shows that they may have some elements of proto-self. But still the question continues, which was asked by Nagel in 1973, what is likely to be a bat? If you extend that to fish, we cannot say that, because evolutionarily as well as environmentally, we are located in far, far distant positions. So if I can quote Kevin Lalande, one of the big name in the field of evolution, of the research on evolution of culture, he came up with a very interesting paper from school to fashions. School means fish groups. So like you know, culture is nothing but the norms given by the society to the individual or agents. So if you analyze, you can see that the fishes which is living in different kind of social groups or different kind of social setups shows variation in their behavior. For instance, we recently completed a study in which we collected fishes from 3 different ecosystems. Very simply speaking, the species which we are focusing is called climbing perch, which is the only one fish in the total 32,000 fish species has been reported to collect and stock the food when it is available. So these fishes, like monkeys, stock the food in their mouth. So like you asked, we cannot exactly ask whether equivalent of culture or human culture is available there, but we can find that when the number of the individual changes or the dominant pattern changes, there may be changes in the behaviors. So what we found was that we had 3 kinds of fishes. One lives in an area where enough food material is available, very less competition. And we had another group of fishes coming from very stark, very like canals where they feel a lot of food scarcity, and fishes which is actually we call in quote unquote as middle class fishes, where food is available but they have to take the risk to get the food. So that is the big paddy fields or lakes. So we compared the food stocking behavior in these three species, and we found that these three, the same species living in these three different environment, which is different in the number of other individuals present as well as the food available, they behave totally differently. So in one way we can say that, so if we analyze the literature, we can see that culture can be considered as a fine tuning of the behavior as well as the brain circuit required for that in order to survive in a defined situation. It could be social or it could be environmental. In that case, we will have to say that, or the evidence shows that fishes also can have the protoculture or the culture. So they also fine tune their behavior. Similarly, the process of acculturation, which is happening in the case of human beings, also can be brought in, because there are studies which shows that animal changes the perception system when they move from one kind of environment or one kind of social system to another kind of. For instance, there are one of the studies which showed that, which was actually one of the basis for the understanding the neural basis of behavior such as dominance, subordination and all that. They were using a kind of fish which is a friend of our tilapia, and they found that, so if you analyze this tilapia society, you can see that there will be a dominant individual, dark in color, and there will be subordinate males who are not supposed to change their color into darker one. When they are becoming darker, or if you artificially change their color, you can see that the dominant male will attack it. So they found that the moment you remove the fish, dominant male, from one tank to another tank where there are so many other males which is larger or powerful than this male, you can see the male losing the color. Not only color, but the neurons in median preoptic area. It becomes less reproductively, its capacity for reproduction comes down and its behavior pattern changes. So the fine tuning is happening in fishes also. So like discussed by many of the big names in the field, one of the biggest difficulty with consciousness is its definition. So if you start with Valera's definition that there is an external thing or an internal thing, you can call even a bacteria as a conscious organism, because if something noxious is there, it moves away from that. So the or if you consider a human being, you can even go up to the level of awareness, meta-awareness, or even or even up to the super consciousness level, which many people claim so. So in my opinion, one of the major challenge which consciousness study is facing now is to come up with a unified definition of consciousness, because this is like the search image hypothesis. If you have an image in your mind which you are searching for, you will be getting only that element, because the environment as well as the society is too heterogeneous. So what we will have to come out is to come out with what image we all of us are supposed to search from different angles. So the moment we are able to come up with a consensus on that image, I feel that consciousness cannot continue as a mystery.